Welcome everybody to Game Sushi. Tonight we're going to take a look at Hellblade and see how that runs on the Intel Arc A770. Now I wanted to look at this game because it has DirectX 12 and DirectX 11 as a setting that we can toggle between the two. So I'll show you, these are the settings I'm using right now. It makes the game look great, really pretty, and at the same time we're actually getting a really good frame rate in game. I've seen it around over 100 FPS, right around the 115 mark, all the way up to like 120 something to 130. You can see that I'm using Afterburner. It's in the top left. Yeah, it's probably not as in depth as maybe some other channels might have, where you can see all the different CPU threads and all of that good stuff. And I just figured for the purposes, we're really concerned about frame rate, so I didn't want to clutter everything up, just to let you get an idea of what kind of performance you will get if you are using an Arc GPU. Okay, so one thing to note, this game when I installed it, ray tracing was turned on to high and everything was turned on to very high. And I'm assuming that's because, and this happens to me a lot when I install a game with my Arc, is that I think it sees that I have 16 gigs of VRAM and then it just cranks everything to the max. If I had a NVIDIA GPU or AMD GPU, probably would be pretty accurate in how it auto configures the settings. But I think since Arc is so new, it doesn't really know what to do, and then it sees that VRAM, and at least my experience has been that it just cranks everything up. So first I'm going to run this with no ray tracing with my optimized settings, and there's not that many to choose from. So we're just going to stick with DirectX 12 for now, and I'm going to do new game because I didn't even get that far into it. Now, right here, when I was just using the settings right after I installed, this was at like 32 FPS. I'm assuming because, like I said, everything was on like super high, and even ray tracing was super high. And as you can see right now, we're getting pretty good FPS. The frame time graph looks pretty decent. There's no major spikes, at least not yet. So that's pretty positive. Now I am capturing an OBS, so if you're just playing this on your Arc GPU, you're probably going to get better FPS with these settings than I'm showing. You know, if you have similar system specs. Now, since this game doesn't have a built-in benchmark, and I'm just kind of having to rely on this FPS counter and just basically starting the game and just seeing what we can get FPS-wise, it's really hard to compare and see how much of an FPS hit we're getting from OBS.
They've been around ever since the tragedy. Well, that's not quite true. Some are old, some are new, but they've changed. I think the darkness changed them, just like it changed her.
If you're wondering why I keep kind of harping about an FPS hit with OBS, is when I do these benchmarks, I don't so much do them from the perspective that, you know, you're somebody that's just curious about Arc, but as that you're somebody that's curious about Arc and may want to do more than just game. Maybe you want to stream, maybe you want to capture gameplay. Typically, when you capture in OBS, the FPS you would normally get does go down a little bit. The last game I did a video benchmark on was Cyberpunk, Now that has a built-in benchmark in it, so it was very easy to see what my average FPS was when I wasn't capturing and when I was. The only and even then, the difference was about 10 FPS. Now, I can guess that right now I'm getting a 10 FPS hit that I would normally be getting if I wasn't capturing an OBS. But to be honest, since I don't have a static benchmark to compare to, just moving around the camera is going to make the FPS fluctuate. Since the FPS is fluctuating, it's pretty much impossible to tell what FPS hit I'm getting from just capturing. So if you ask me if I notice one, I actually don't notice an FPS hit, whether I'm capturing an OBS or not. I don't see any difference on my monitor. I don't see any difference in my gaming inputs. So take that as you will. I think if you didn't have an FPS counter to look at, or you couldn't rely on a built-in benchmark, I think it'd be really hard for anybody to notice a 10 FPS difference. So yeah, it's possible that right now we're getting a slight FPS hit like we did in Cyberpunk when we did that benchmark. If you haven't watched that video, I recommend you check it out. Just if you want to see what Intel Arc can do, especially since CD Projekt Red implemented Intel XeSS, or as I call it, XS, just because it's easier. It's a great indicator of what the card can do. Now, I'm assuming that running it in DirectX 12, as we are right now, is probably going to be our best bet for performance. I know this is an older game, but I wanted to showcase this because I know it's a game that a lot of people think of fondly. A lot of people consider this, at the top of their list of best games that they've played. It is a beautiful looking game, very unique. It's got a really good sound design, just everything about it is really good. Now, I personally frequent the subreddit Intel Arc, and I recommend that you do too, because if you're curious about getting these cards, it's good to be a part of a forum or a community so that you can see people posting their issues. And keep in mind that it's primarily people posting issues. Yeah, sometimes people post like cool articles when they come out and things like that, but just keep in mind that it's primarily a place to post issues and things, so don't let that skew your judgment that it's terrible, because yeah, I know that Arc had a really shaky launch, but Intel's really improved things quite a bit. They released driver updates, and so far that I've seen, I've had this card since February, and since then I've seen Intel release driver updates about 2 to 3 times a month. And when there's big new releases coming out, they do a really good job of trying to get out ahead of time and have a driver already in place for that release. So that's been pretty awesome. One issue I did see in the Intel Arc subreddit about this game in particular is that people that have a CPU that has a built-in GPU, like an iGPU, or what does Intel or AMD call it? They call it a AGU, or basically for AMD it's any processor that ends with G. Like I have a 5600X, but it doesn't have an iGPU. At least I don't think so. But the 5600G does. Anyway, anybody with an Intel Arc trying to play this game for some reason had issues because it would, as soon as they would launch it, it would try to use the CPU, like the GPU from the CPU instead. It wasn't It wasn't using the arc. And then a lot of people assumed, you know, having that issue, that they were getting only 1 or 3 FPS in this game, and that it was the arc performing that poorly. But all they had to do was just go into their BIOS and specify to use the to not use the GPU. And again, that's just going to be something that's very specific to certain hardware. But that was one of the first issues I initially saw about this game in particular, and Arc. It wasn't necessarily Arc's fault. It was just that for whatever reason in the BIOS, those particular people, for whatever reason, the game was using their CPU to render the game instead of the GPU. Now, I personally haven't had too many issues with my Arc, really at all. There is one I can think of, and it's one I recently have started to experience. Prior to this month, the dual monitors that I was using, the highest refresh rate was 80 and the other one was 60. So not super high refresh rate. One was 60 hertz, the other one was 80 hertz. I never had any of the reported issues where one of the screens goes black, either like when you launch a game and then if you turn off the monitor and turn it back on, like the game comes back on, or some people just having issues with a display waking up, like not all of them turning back on, just weird things like that. I did not have any of that. I also never had any of the power draw issues. Essentially, this card will idle around 30 to 40 watts, which is pretty high. But Intel has a fix where you just follow their guide. I'll link it in the description. And basically all you have to do is just set the control panel setting for the PCI slot specifically to use maximum power savings. And then in the BIOS, you just have to set the, what is it? I forget what the name of the setting is. I'll link that in the description too, but basically you just pick a power saving profile essentially, and it could be named something different depending what motherboard you have. But mine is set to L1 entry. So those two things in conjunction will actually make the Intel Arc card idle at something more reasonable, under 10 watts or around 15 watts. And that's what I was experiencing before. However, I guess because of the way this card is architected, if you are using anything above, and I can vouch for this, anything above 80 hertz, because even when I was, anything above 70 hertz, because when I had that one 80 hertz monitor at 70 hertz, that Intel fix for the power draw worked no problem. No problem. When I turned that monitor to 80 hertz, I went back to idling at 30 to 40. Now, is that a deal breaker to me? No. Might that be a deal breaker to some of you out there? Probably. Probably. Might want to find something else if that's a big deal to you. Me personally, it's not. And since I changed out one of my monitors to a higher refresh rate, to a 144 hertz display, 1440 monitor, the power draw, it just idles at 30 to 40. It doesn't matter if I have that fix from Intel in place, same settings. It is unfortunately the same thing. I just can't idle really. I mean, yeah, sometimes it gets a little under 30, but generally around 30 to 40 watts is what this card idles out now with the higher refresh rate. And Intel knows that that's an issue, and it is what it is, essentially. With Battle Mage, that should be fixed, but for the Alchemist line of GPUs, that's just going to be a thing. So just something to keep in mind. Those are really the only two issues I've experienced. the power draw, and actually the other one is the monitor thing. I don't know if it's specifically this monitor, but I've seen the black screen thing enough in the Arc subreddit to know it's something that can happen. Now for me, it's really not a big deal. And I'm not getting the black screen thing where like all of a sudden the screen goes black. And I want to stress this is not everybody, by the way. But what I mean is, if I download a game on my system that I have never played before, the first time I launch it on that brand new 144 hertz monitor, it'll be on, but the screen will be black until I just quickly hit the button to power it off, power it back on again, and then the game is there. Very strange. It will never, ever, ever happen again when I go to launch that game. But so far, when I installed this, when I installed Cyberpunk to go to do the last video that I did, or even the other Intel XESS video that I did for Blood Hunt, as soon as I installed that, launched it for the first time on that high refresh rate monitor, when I launched the game, it did have a black screen until I powered off the monitor, powered it back on. Now, that could just be because of the monitor. But I will say that while it's not that big of a deal, I'm just saying that so that you guys are aware that, that if you want an honest user experience from somebody that has this GPU, I love this GPU. Those are just some things to be aware of. If you have a 144 hertz monitor or higher, just keep in mind that might be something that you experience. Now, is that a deal breaker to where first time you ever launch a game, you can still hear the sound? It's there. There's no errors. There's no nothing. It's just that the screen is black, and it'll fix itself once you turn the monitor off and back on. And then it never, ever happens for that game ever again. Very, very weird. Is that a deal breaker to me? No, it's not. But I could see how some of you probably wouldn't want to deal with that. And I'm fairly confident that Intel will iron out all of these issues and when Battle Mage comes out. But if your monitors are 60 hertz monitors, 70 hertz monitors, you're probably not going to have any issues at all. The fact that the power draw on a higher refresh rate monitor than 70 makes the card idle at 30 to 40 watts is kind of weird. So as soon as I added a high refresh rate monitor, I started having that black screen issue. I don't know, I feel like it's not really so much a coincidence, but it's just one of those quirks that causes the card to idle higher. Something about how it's architected, I feel, this is my personal opinion, you can think whatever you want. If you're an Arc owner and you don't experience that issue, that's fine, But how I feel about this personally is I think that this high refresh rate monitor behavior is related to the architecture and how it deals with power draw. And if you think about it, you can configure your power settings in regards to behavior regulating sleep, hibernation. When you wake up your machine, how you set your power settings in the Windows control panel, those are all things you can affect with choosing different power saving settings. So the fact that the power draw and the black screen issue both all of a sudden, like the power draw fix doesn't work and I start getting the black screen issue, like I said, I just feel like that's kind of all related. But I still recommend this card. It's a really good card, and this game is really, I mean, this GPU is really just gonna be for 1080 and 1440 Gaming. It can do some really well optimized games at 4K, but it has to be really well optimized, and the developers would have had to have developed it with Intel Arc in mind. Now, some good examples of that would be Hogwarts. Now Cyberpunk. Cyberpunk runs great. Previously did not. So do not be discouraged. If you are curious about this GPU, I think it's still a really great, affordable buy. I think it's wonderful. And if you play this game and you know how to get past this, you're probably like, what are you doing? You're like supposed to go over here and over there. I've never actually played this game before. I'm just kind of doing this as a benchmark. I just bought it recently, so yes, I will play through it, and I think I'm going to really like it, but I just wanted to benchmark it. So, all right, so that does it for the DirectX 12. Let's set it to DirectX 11 and just kind of see what we can get. Sorry, I went really long on that behavioral rant and my GPU experience, so hopefully you did get something out of that little rant. Okay, so we got to quit this. I'm going to start the video back up here after I relaunch, because I'm sure you don't want to see that. Okay, so let me just check that we're still using DirectX 11 in case you wanted to run it at that, just because. And I'm going to leave all these settings the same. And we're going to do new game again. And just see how it runs with DirectX 11. All right, I was expecting this to be much lower. I can see a lot more little spikes in the frame time meter. Nothing terrible. But if you are going to run this, you probably definitely want to run this on DirectX 12. So I don't think it's really worth seeing much more than once I get to the shore. Maybe I'll walk around a little bit once I get to the shore, but I definitely won't be doing this as long as the DirectX 12 one, because I think it would be kind of pointless to play this on DirectX 11 if you have Arc. Her hair and the fur looks a little bit strange. It definitely looks better in DirectX 12, but you know, that's to be expected. This is still very playable. Again, I mean, if I'm not ray tracing, but I have FSR set to quality or ultra quality. To be honest, I couldn't tell the difference appearance-wise between FSR, ultra quality, and I also couldn't tell a difference on quality and running it natively, just 1440. I mean, maybe you could. I couldn't. So, I mean, overall, I think no matter what settings you want to run with, I think you're going to have a great time. You're probably not going to be able to do ray tracing on high unless you're using FSR. And I think when I had ray tracing on high, that really tanked FPS. But if I think with FSR, it actually was a little bit playable. Maybe we'll try that. I'm going to go back to DirectX 12, and then we'll try the ray tracing. But to be honest, I didn't see that the ray tracing, even with everything else turned up to high, I didn't see that it really added much value to the visual fidelity. But this is certainly high enough FPS, even at DirectX 11. I mean, if you wanted to capture gameplay of this, just do a whole playthrough on a gaming channel, or maybe even thinking about doing that, and you really love this game, you could totally do it. Just go for it. You could even stream this game. And again, this is not the optimal way in my opinion, to have this set, like you should be using DirectX 12. And you can crank FSR to ultra quality and leave everything else on high. And you're going to be getting well over 100 FPS, even capturing an OBS. So this game runs super well. Really, really well. And at 1440. So I have seen a lot more spikes in this. You can see in the frame time, it's, if I pan around, I mean, it's still well over 60, right? Well over 60. And if we just take a look at the settings again, everything else is still the same. FSR, ultra quality. View effects, I turned to medium because in this, there's not that many things I can change. But view effects also deals with reflection quality and some other things. And this is my optimized way of how I would run this. So I'm going to switch this back to 12. And we're actually going to turn ray tracing on. Let's live dangerously. I'm going to just leave it on high, and we'll see what happens. Again, I am going to just restart the game. It's too boring to watch me reload, so I'll pick back up here in a second. So I apologize about going on that longer than I thought rant about the power draw and then that one weird black screen issue that I started getting. I'm not trying to scare anybody away from getting this card if they're really set on getting it. Like I said, I think it's great. But I just can't say that I haven't experienced any issues or had zero issues with this card, because I have had those two that I mentioned. They're not enough for me to absolutely not want to use this card. There are definitely things that I didn't know before I got it. But even knowing them now, I still would have gotten this card, because that black screen issue, not a big deal. Like I said, if I install a game I've never played before, and it doesn't do it 100% of the time, but just it has the last 3 times. But I've also reinstalled things, because sometimes I don't have like the most hard drive space. Okay. Let me just check this. Ray tracing high. Okay, everything else. All right, let's run this. And then I can blab. That black screen thing. I have uninstalled some games to make room for other games, and then reinstalled that game that I wanted to play again. And the one, like I think that happened for, what was it? Cyberpunk, because when I was going to do my video for that Cyberpunk benchmark, which actually I recently got a lot of views for, so thank you for everybody that came over here from that video, and everybody that subscribed because of that video. Thank you. But I originally had Cyberpunk installed, and then I uninstalled it because it ran like doo-doo. When I installed it that time, I did get that black screen issue. First time I launched the game, black screen. All I did was click monitor off, click monitor on, and then boom, the image showed up like it was there. It's almost like the screen went into power saver mode for whatever reason when the game opened. Very weird. And then when I found out that they released, CD Projekt Red released patch 1.62 for the game, I re-downloaded it, and when I launched it that time, no black screen issue. Very, very odd. So I can't say 100% that that black screen issue is because of my Arc GPU. It could just be this new monitor that I got, this new 144 hertz refresh rate monitor. If you're curious, it's a Lenovo G32QC-10. So it's kind of like a budget 1440 monitor, but what's nice is it's 32 inches, hence the name. It could just be that. But given the power draw issue that I mentioned before, And by the way, in real life, I work in IT, so I'm always looking for like correlations of behavior affecting something else. Because, you know, when I have to troubleshoot something, I got to think of all possibilities. So that's why I think that way. Personally, the black screen issue on its own, if it was just that, I would say, okay, maybe it's the DP cable. Well, I swapped that out, and it has happened. It has continued to happen, that sort of behavior. But I would think, okay, maybe it's the monitor then, you know, because it wasn't happening to me before. But, you know, there are some people with different black screen issues. Not all black screens are created equal on the Intel Arc form. For some people, it's related to using HDMI. That is a completely separate issue. And you know what? I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a video probably here in the next month or so, just to overall my user experience in all the ARC issues that I'm aware of. Maybe I'll do it like as a list, and like a video of a list of issues to watch out for, like a, hey, before you buy, check this video out kind of thing. But just give you just, you know, a more in-depth view of my experience with the ARC issues that I've seen people have in the ARC subreddit. Some issues that I've been able to help out certain people with, and just issues to be aware of in general. They're not like huge issues. You know, with any GPU, sometimes, you know, you can get a dud. And that's with any GPU. I mean, you can get a dud. I remember, what was it? From Amazon. One time, before I got the 970, I was actually going to go Team Red. It was going to be a Power Color Radeon. It's like RX 480 or I don't remember. But I was really excited to get it. And then when I got it, the thing just didn't work, and I had to RMA it. And then I'm like, okay, well, yeah, I'll just go NVIDIA for this generation. And then I ended up getting the 970. You know, those things happen. So you do see posts like that in the Intel Arc forum, but I can only think of like maybe 2 posts since I frequented that place, that subreddit, since I've had this card in February, where they got a ARC delivered to them, and it sounded, at least from their post, like it was dead on arrival. And since then, I mean, I've read like thousands of posts. So if there's only 2 I can think of where it arrived dead, I mean, I don't think that's that bad, all things considered. Again, I'm not trying to scare you away from this card, but just be aware that certain people have had different issues. If you're just using, like I said, lower refresh rate monitors around the 60 hertz to 70 hertz range, you're not going to have any power draw issues, and you're probably like 90% positive that you're not going to get any of the black screen issues that I'm talking about. I just personally feel like that black screen thing is more so related to the power draw issue, like they're just somehow combined. But yeah, I think maybe not the next video, because I want to benchmark Red Dead Redemption 2 next to kind of show you my settings and how I run that game and how well it runs. Oh my god, it runs so good. So good, and it looks beautiful. I think I'll do that video next. But anyway, to go back to this, we are ray tracing. We've been ray tracing this whole time. The frames are not that bad, and the lighting does look better. We're on ray tracing high. But look at that frame time graph. I mean, it kind of looks like somebody's drawing a picket fence in the background. I'm going to switch this to ray tracing medium. This is how I would run it if I was going to do any ray tracing. Much more stable. When I pan back there, it does kind of go a little haywire. But if I'm just walking through here, it's not bad. I mean, it's still over 60. I probably wouldn't want to stream or capture gameplay with it like this, but you know, if you wanted to just get in the photo mode here and take some photos while you're doing this. I mean, sometimes, you know, you want to turn the settings way up, right? If you're going to take fancy screenshots, but then depending on your graphics card, it could make it really hard to use when your card's struggling like that. So if you do turn on ray tracing so you can take some better screenshots, just know that you'll have a good time. It'll be very usable. Probably not optimal for playing, but pretty usable. Anyway, I think that pretty much does it. Like I said, there's not that many settings that we can tweak in here. And again, I don't want to scare anybody away from getting an Intel Arc. I think it's great. You know, just to reiterate, I think there's probably people out there with higher refresh rate monitors than me that haven't had the black screen issue that I mentioned. So who knows, it could just be my Lenovo monitor that I bought. I mean, it is kind of a cheapo monitor. I think the contrast and the colors are great looking in person. It looks beautiful, especially right now since we're running it at the settings that I normally run. We're around 115, and that capability of running 144 hertz, I mean, it just looks so good to my eyes. I love it. But maybe that's an issue more to do with my monitor. But like I said, yeah, next video I'll probably just go into an overall user experience more in depth and go over some common ARC issues, which to me aren't really that big of a deal. Nothing really major. The GPU just works, and you can see a lot of benchmarking videos out there, benchmarking different games and stuff. Intel's doing a great job with driver updates. So, all right, guys, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.